Greetings, fellow travelers, and welcome to The Way of the Showman, the podcast where we view the world through the lens of showmanship. I am Captain Frodo, and I will be your gracious host and guide along the way. Since I spoke to you last, I have premiered my new family show. I did a festival in Haraldsvang in Vangen in Haugesund, Norway, that I had set as my deadline to have all of my acts ready. So I did 50 minutes of brand new, never done before material on that festival, and that was very excellent. And it reminds me of how different the experience is when you doing material that has been tried and tested and the audience in front of audiences. And when I then go out, all that I worry about is how to present the material, whilst when you go out and you have done never done it before, I'm so in the moment. I'm so caught up and searching. I have done so much preparation just to of course to learn the skills, but also in what I'm going to say, the intended reactions and everything. And then the world throws just a whole nother level of chaos onto you as things don't work out right. There were so many kids that they were just sitting everywhere, and I was going to do this massive stunt for me where I'm doing a rollerball on top of a table and juggling with handcuffs on and everything, and it was just kids sitting on both sides, and I knew I was going to need to step off a couple of times. Like that was just, I just had to have that in mind. And there were so many kids there that put this just in real big, intense pressure on me. And then I did, so the weekend after, I did another festival, the Circus Landsbyen, the circus village, put on by Sverre Våge and Circus Santi in Oslo, and got to do a shorter version of this stuff, like a 40-minute show where I ended up with a different finale. But there too, getting to do 4 shows, 2 shows a day, 40-minute shows where I was testing in this new material, that was so good. Even just in those first 4 shows, the shape and like the back, whenever I think that I have my acts already ready, rehearsed, by the time you start performing, you go, oh, this is just like the spine, and the whole rest, all the rest of the skeleton has to grow out of it, and the flesh has to fill it out. And the really good stuff is when you add the skin and stuff to the act, and little bits. I just see glimpses where I go, oh, this is particularly funny, and I never knew that it was there. But then when you're on stage, all of a sudden it becomes clear that, oh, of course I have to do this. I step into these, what I feel like is just these potentialities or adjacent possibles, things that are in the routine, and you're out there and you're performing and you're doing something, and all of a sudden the kid says something and you go, oh, that's right, there's a whole dimension here. So for me, this has been a time of intense creative work, but it has I have slowed down a little bit on the working on the writing for the podcast. So all of this stuff that I'm talking about now is freshly reworked and tuned. So I'm excited that this project is coming to an end, and this project being The Way of the Showman. These are the episodes that have, when you see on the episode names, they have at the end of it, it says The Way, and we're now up to The Way 29, meaning this is the 29th episode of the book that I wrote during the pandemic. And we are now wrapping up, and attention, as it turns out, attention sort of wraps into the show, which is we're going through the 4 pillars of the showman, the audience, and then attention. And we're there now, and we're about to look at show, but I'm at this point where the attention aspect, where we've talked about the last few episodes of the Way episodes, because we've had, of course, last episode was the first time when I did a story, and I had some good feedback on that. So if you have any thoughts on what that would be like, then maybe I'll make a special little mini season in the future of 3 or 4 episodes with a slightly longer episode, just with a story, sketching out what I think of as my mythopoetic project, where I'm like creating myths or a mythology, or like what would it be like if in a secret society that lived by the tenets that can be drawn from what we do. What happens if we introduce some supernatural elements, take the superpower skills of show folk and push it just that little bit into another realm. Anyway, these are the thoughts for the future, as well as a season much shorter than this one, but sort of mini season as well of conversations. I've already started to record some deeper conversations on different topics with Jay Gilligan, but have some other exciting people as well. And I have some very old recordings that I did a few years ago from when I was wondering about doing a podcast. But it never turned out to be anything in that format. So there's a couple of those that I thought could be interesting too. So exciting things ahead. But for now, I am most excited about how intricate and how much is coming together in these next few episodes that we'll have. So we're delving back into the topic of attention, and today we're talking about transforming the audience's attention, and we're transforming attention into interest. So without further ado, let's go. So, transforming attention into interest. As we've seen, getting someone's attention can be as easy as screaming in a quiet room, roll around on the ground like a crazy person, or poke someone. And this kind of attention is a kind of reflex, an evolved trait, which is necessary for survival. If there's a deep rumbling growl nearby you, you will snap into attention. If in the bushes behind you you hear some sort of roar, your head will turn towards it, and it might raise your heart rate. It triggers a fight or flight response. It can give you a full jump scare that sends a powerful physical jolt through your body. And this reaction can save your life, so it's of great value to make it a reflex, that is to say, unencumbered by the relatively time-consuming process of logic and conscious thought. React before you think is a good strategy to stay alive. In our evolutionary history, the ones who were slowest to turn to spot a tiger in the bushes or didn't care to react at all, they did not live to pass on their genes, get kids and carry on that. So thus it's better to have snapped into attention one time too much than one less than necessary. You can easily go run away 10 times from a tiger that weren't there, but it's the one time when there is a tiger or a snapping turtle ready to snap you right in the neck, then I don't know if snapping turtle snaps in the neck. I don't know where the preferred place of attack or for a snapping turtle is. Anyway, I am fascinated by those peculiar animals. Now, this kind of reflexive sort of attention, this is easy to get and can be used in our performances as a tool to get the audience to pay attention, snap into attention. But this kind of attention grabbing is not the whole answer. You can't just scare them, wow them, surprise them or shock them randomly for an indefinite amount of time, because it'll get boring. Though probably, as always when I say something like that, great careers have probably been made from only doing random explosive attention grabbing stuff one after the other with no rhyme or reason for the duration of the whole performance. So we're just talking in general here, and once you understand the rules you can break them. Now all this is to say that once you have assured yourself that you have your audience's attention, at some point you need to relax, and you can relax that pressure of screaming at them. And I sometimes think this is like as a gross over exaggeration, but a documentary made in America and a documentary made in Great Britain, where an American documentary is like And now, here we're going to go and we're going to see this crazy, look at this guy, wow, amazing, look at this is the tallest mountain in the entire world. And they're speaking to you like they are trying to grab your attention all the time, whilst the British one will be all, oh yeah, and here we see the... I'm obviously terrible at the accents, and I shouldn't have gone down that lane, but it's the mode of speaking where you turn on an American documentary and it's like it's constantly feel like it's trying to sell you something, and it's selling them. And this is the kind of attention that I talk about here. They're selling you the documentary and trying to hold you to stop you from clicking onto something else. But if that happens for the duration of the show, then it can be tiring to watch. So, as you feel that you have their attention, their reflexive attention, you've popped your paper bag and you have their attention, then you need to do something further with it. We've spoken about this. It's like then you have to modulate or curate the time and attention and modulate it. So here we come back to the idea of the showman as the curator of time and attention. And because you must carefully curate and modulate the attention that you have grabbed, you need to shape and mold it like a sculptor shaping her clay. So let's look closer at the transitioning from attention grab into the next phase of the performance process. I found this in a book called Handbook for the Amateur Magician, which is from 1950. Obviously, I didn't read it when it came out. But the author of this, Henry Hay, talks about this modulation of attention and names it by making a distinction between attention and interest. Attention, he says in the book, can be gotten by exploding a paper bag. But to get the audience to care about you and your act, you need to develop that attention into interest, which he describes as a sense of being involved in some process, actual or potential. So Henry Hay separates attention from interest and saying that attention is what you get first, and then it can be turned into interest. And he defines interest. We'll do that one more time. It is a sense of being involved in some process, actual or potential. So Henry Hay suggests that we should break the phenomena of attention apart. And I really like this. It really resonated with me when I read it. So let's follow his suggestion and see what we learn. But the way he defines interest is for the audience member to feel like they are involved in the process, that they're sort of participating in it, whether that is like they're participating in the process that's actually participating, or that it's some potential or whatever. So it's this involvement and participation which he pontificates as important. And I'm going over that 3 or 4 times there because I'm going to build on it later on. So as an aside, I do find it interesting, as when we look at interest, this that we have already looked at the word interest back when we looked at the area of interest in the Geometry of Showmanship chapter. There we looked at the etymology of the word interest as an interest, it being between, and we linked it to the way I like to use the word midway, as not just where the showman does his work, but the way that the showman, with a capital S, the showman, archetypal, where that he walks through life. And it's the midway that we walk, the interest, the place of being between, the place between the showman and the audience and all this. This is just resonant language for me, and it's fun that now, all this time later, the word pops up again, and that looking at its definition rather than its etymological or just the roots of the word, that we find even more useful wisdom. Because words are, after all, deep repositories of knowledge. And going back and looking at the history of words is a very interesting thing. Looking at where the word came from and looking at what the different meanings of them are. And then you see interesting thoughts that are then being kept in this word, and if you use the words in the correct way, which of course is like powerful when you're reading poetry or whatever, when the words, all of a sudden you're looking at a word that you think you know, but then something new comes out of it. So we looked at the interest, and now we're going to look at a little bit further into what interest could be, because the difference that Henry Hay made or separated out between attention and interest, it resonated with me immediately. This essay is just like a short essay in the beginning of his book, and I liked the description of the state of mind that he aimed for in his audience, that he wanted them to experience. And I liked that he had thoughts about this at all, because I had already come to believe that showmanship was a deeply participatory process. As we've already explored together, I believe that this state of joint participating attention is what a showman strives towards, and it is when they participate that the actual show kind of emerges at all. So Henry Hay, separating the audience's participatory experience out as something other than the initial attention grab, to me beautifully singled out the moment this transcendence sort of happens, where it transcends into becoming a show and not just like a car crash, because there is a difference, and of course. Now, I began to look at my own acts and the start of my performances with this distinction in mind, and found it in my acts and performances in general. And when I constructed my longer shows, I always, like, before I had thought of this naming of it, I thought and put great consideration into my opening act, my opening words, because whatever it would be, those words or actions would be, it would need to grab the audience and then pull them in. And from there I considered what the sort of second and third act would be, always keeping the evolving experience of the audience in mind. And the nature of the first acts that I chose always has traits of attention grabbing. The second, and certainly the third, can contain slower and deeper material, and by then I can assume that I have their attention for something which takes longer to set up, or that requires more from them. We've talked about that before, of the threshold. How much are you expecting the audience to pay attention here? And the festival in Vangen that I just spoke about, that's outdoor, but it's slightly separate from the rest of the festival in the forest, but still a lot of noise. And then I did not a street show reel where I have to pull my own crowd, but an outdoor show with a whole school worth. And doing these outdoor shows, I see like, oh wow, I had relied too much on the interest of the audience when it's so big and it's outdoor and lots of kids running around in the playground, and I was like, I need to do a bit more of a crowd build here, and I need to turn up the attention thing and not rely on the interest. I realized that some of the acts I had almost too much content or whatever that I've been thinking for an indoor different kind of crowd. Because when I went to the circus village, Circus Landsbyen, the weekend after, some of this material was slaying. Maybe it was also because I was there the first time and I was doing it for the first time in these outdoor shows. But it's you might have to turn up that thing and expect less of the audience, or less participation in a way. So all of those thoughts about what my first act and second act and all that had been there. So it wasn't like this concept of attention into interest revolutionized my approach. It was more that it put words on something which before I had merely sort of felt. It concretized the idea for me by putting it into so few words, in essence by naming it. And this meant I could see clearer what was going on. And in this developing clarity, I began to think that there might be at least one more sort of micro step buried inside this distinction that Henry Hay had. Because you do need to snap them into attention with banging a drum or putting something on fire, and then you are driving them towards feeling like they are participating in the thing and anticipating what's going on. But I think there might be one more distinction that I thought. And by now I guess that you feel we're in this sort of deep esoteric terrain, but to my surprise, this micro step that I'd sort of gone, I think there's something more than them feeling like they're participating in it. But then when I was looking at the Oxford English Dictionary, at the definition of the word interest, to compare what it was that Henry Hay's participatory way of doing it, is this the common definition in the dictionary? And it turned out that it wasn't quite, but that one of these definitions really fitted well with what it was, this extra step that I felt he was missing. And again, just opening the dictionary to these words, words are carriers of distilled wisdom. Each word has captured some aspect of human relations to reality in one shape or another, and dictionaries are repositories of this collective wisdom. So maybe I shouldn't be fully surprised that this little micro step of turning attention into interest was found in there. Because each dictionary captures slightly different aspects of whatever word they define, or else they have probably just cut and pasted that definition from some other dictionary if they're exactly the same. Thus, it is no surprise that the old Oxford English Dictionary describes interest slightly differently than Henry Hay, because he highlights, as I've said now many times, the participatory involvement, his a sense of being involved in some process, actual or potential, whilst the Oxford definition goes as follows. Interest is the state of wanting to know or learn about something or someone. It is a state of wanting to know or learn about something or someone. And at a glance, this is quite similar. It's pretty simple and straightforward and a good description of interest. But to me, this highlights this subtle difference, which to me is valuable to point out. Because I would say that this wanting to know or learn more, this leaning in, getting the audience to lean in, as I call it, seemed really apt a description of this step, which I think is necessary before the audience gets the experience of participation that Henry Hay describes. Like before they feel like, I'm part of this and I'm anticipating what comes next because I'm part of it, comes this wanting to know or learn more, which is the Oxford definition. Wanting to know or learn more, or leaning in. This is a perfect first step into the experience of participation. Before you feel like you're part of a show, and the show fully comes into existence, you must willingly lean in and want to know or experience more. So another difference between the two kinds of interests is their differing relations to time. Henry Hay uses attention to mean what happens when you pop a paper bag, and this is experienced as arrested moments of reflexive attention. They're momentary, short, sharp shocks. If you have a metal bin and you put a firecracker in it, then you get this snap of attention to it, and people are looking, and then there's a moment after that where they go, what is that? Okay, it's a guy putting a firecracker in a bucket. And yeah, so that's a snap of attention. It's short and sharp, and you need to then modulate it afterwards. Whilst interest concerns something ongoing. Interest has duration. You don't lean in and want to participate in the popped paper bag. But if the paper bag is popped and then white feathers trickles out of it after it's popped, and there's blood in the bag, and then you pull out some scruffy looking dove, then the audience might lean in. We're using lean in quotation marks. This is like in air quotes here, like that, because they might lean in the form of sitting back in their chairs with widening eyes and hands finding their way up to cover their mouth, because as they see a squashed bird, they're going like, oh, what is this? And they will now probably lean in because they want to know what's going to happen now. Was that the end? Did he just kill a bird and we just watched that? How is he going to react? Because nothing brings out character like a genuine problem or obstacle. And having just killed one of your birds on stage, if that now magically resurrects or whatever, or if you just chuck it away and it was a gag, then you have told a lot about who you are as a character. But anyway, all of that is just to say, like, the pop paper bag is one thing, but if there's something else in there that makes you, then it's transformed into interest, and there's a difference in the time. I think the attention as used word, the words that Henry here is using it, and as we're using it here, attention is this short, sharp snap into attention in the crowd build, and then you want to start something that makes them lean in and want to be part of the process. It's like you snap the paper bag and then you go, oh, I'm just going to stand this metal pole up here. Oh, could you just hold this? And it's now you're promising something for the future. You're promising something's going to happen with this stick. And the people are getting involved, maybe holding it, and then this is all making them sort of lean in, and once a person is in there holding it, then they're directly participating, and eventually everybody is participating in it. Who's watching it too, they might feel it, and they feel the interest. So there's two steps of interest and one of attention. So to sum it up, I see the two definitions of wanting to know more and of feeling part of the process, that they describe these two micro stages of the experience of turning attention into interest. So this means that we get a 3-step process of attention modulation. And we could say that the first step is getting the attention, or grabbing it, as we've been saying. And the second step is to get the audience to want to learn more about who you are and what you're doing. We want them to lean in. So we want them to meet you, the character, struggling now that you've just killed your bird, and then you give them promises. It's like you give them structural hooks, and like you set up you get the unicycle to stand up. You say, in a moment I'm gonna get on top of this unicycle, juggle the fire. That might give this hook, and they're leaning in, and it gives you a structure, and then you start getting them in, and you get them to do call and response, and that all becomes part of taking them into that third step of making them involved in the performance process, that they're pulled into it. So, what are these stages of attention, and how does that connect to the anatomy of shows that we've talked about in a previous episode? Because attention then, in its 3 different aspects, grabbing, leaning in, and participation, can be applied to, of course, to the beginning of our shows, but it can also fruitfully be applied to all the three individual elements of shows. And as you probably remember, or might remember, that in the Anatomy of Shows episode, and all along the way since we've talked about it, we've broken shows down to 3 fundamental elements. What is an act? What is a show? It is a character. Somebody is presenting material, something, in a certain structure. Something has to be done in the beginning, something has to be done after that, until you do the last thing. So it's a character presenting material in a certain structure. And we can now see how each of these elements have their own sphere, which in their own way can be improved by the stages of attention, by applying this. So a good character can burst out onto the scene and grab your attention. She can make you lean in and want to know more about her, or want to know her. She can promise the sheer pleasure of sharing time in her company. Like in a clown show, you could have that. Somebody just comes on and they're just lovely to be with, and that makes me think of Angela de Castro's definition of charisma as the pleasure of being there. That the clown comes in and is just so happy to be there, and so happy to be there with the audience and being there in a moment, trying to connect and looking for some game to play. That you can use these steps of attention coming in with a bang, and or something to grab their attention. So you can look at these 3 steps and look at them in light of character. What does it mean? How does your character first enter the stage? Now, the material of extraordinary displays of skill, they can, like the tones and melodies of music or the movement of dance, invite you in. Extraordinary skill. It can make you lean in and want to know more. But any kind of skill, any jokes, anything, but that's what the material is. Whatever it is that you do, it can make you want to be invited further in. It's like you give some explosive thing first, and then you can make them want to lean in and know more. And then maybe they feel so you could start your act by juggling 7 balls, and this would arrest most people's attention. And it simultaneously makes all kinds of promises of what kind of impossibilities you'll get to see if you stick around. Like, we love to see things well done. We love to see high skill, or 5 balls or 3 balls, whatever it is that you juggle first. So the promise can then be made explicit after that, like you can tell the audience in the end I will juggle the 7 balls atop of this freestanding ladder. I'm going to have it there and have somebody help me get up, and then I'm going to stand right on the top of it. I don't know. This is then a hook or whatever. So this is the promise that would then bleed over into becoming like a structural hook. So the climbing of the wobbly ladder with the risk involved for the performer invites a particular mirroring connection in the audience where, when done right, their heart rate might increase and their palms get sweaty in sympathetic participation. Will the performer successfully be able to climb the ladder? Will they be able to juggle the promised 7 balls on top of it? And how many attempts will it be? And blah, 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 all this. So each of these elements can express a promise that what you're doing is not just one random thing after another, not just a sequence of pop paper bags and balloons, but that it's something which builds towards a greater whole. And this sensing this multiplicity in unity, that there's like you're going to do lots of different stuff, but it is one thing, then they can effortlessly lean in, and as they start to see this going somewhere, they feel like they're part of the performance. So this is a way to look at those two things together. What happens when we apply these little ideas that seems kind of little, or maybe they seem sort of abstract, but you can look at these stages of attention and going like, is this act using every time when I pull out a new skill? Is it just another attention grab, or how have I modulated that? What did I do with this skill beforehand? Has it modulated into something further? So effortlessness and stages of attention are tools. And effortlessness, we'll look at this. I said that the showman is a curator of time and attention, and that he molds and shapes the audience's time and attention. But it didn't elaborate on so much on how this modulation and curation should look. That's a couple of episodes we looked at that. So effortlessness on the behalf of the audience, this is one mode that we can use, that can be painted as an additional color over all aspects of performances, meaning that this is like a technique. We talked about this in the episode where we talked about art and entertainment, where entertainment is you sort of effortlessly, that the audience has this, they don't need to go, okay, and I need to really get my head together and so I can enjoy this performance, but that when you are pulling them in without being an effort for them, it's easy to get into it. So this is something that is a potential tool to be used, just like we did with the stages of attention, that you can look at to go, okay, what is the level of attention, level of effort that is required on the behalf of the audience here. And of course, as the performance goes on, you can ask more and more of them. And it's perhaps important to note that if the experience is too effortless, then of course the audience can lose interest and they might fail to lean in at all. So everything here is a balance, but effortlessness is an important, I think of it as a collar that is like something that you can overlay onto anything, or a tool that you can use to sort of just reflect on whatever it is that you are doing in your show. But if you have like any collar, if you only have that color, then it uses too much, a picture could be ruined. So in the same way, the stages of attention, they can be used as a sort of shorthand in creation. You can ask yourself how any element in your show corresponds to these stages of attention. In this way, the idea of effortlessness in entertainment and stages of attention become general tools that you can analyze or use to improve a performance. Even if you decide not to use them, you can be clear of what it is that you are doing. We looked at effortlessness in this, as I said, in the Entertainment Invites You In chapter. I think that's what it's called in the book. I think it's called Art and Entertainment or something in there. But anyway, you can go back and listen through it again, and probably you'll find stuff you have missed. But anyway, the chapter which describes entertainment as anything which allows the audience to effortlessly pay attention. So, if getting into your performance is made to be effortless, then chances increase that they will pay attention and that they will lean in and that they will want more of whatever experience you're offering them. And you're modulating that effortlessness into something which aims towards all these three steps of the attention process, and then the effort that they put in is because they now feel like they're deeply into the interest and they're participating in a process. Then they feel like they're in it. So after you grab their attention, if you make them lean in and then make them want more as they sort of transcend into feeling part of it, we should aim to make the way into our show as smooth as possible. And then you can ask more of them, even if the beginning of the trip that we walk together in our show with the audience, that should be nice and easy, and then we can climb the mountain as we go. So attention is the way into our specific performances, but it's also the way that we can get into and what shapes our encounters with reality. So it's all these modulations of attention and interest is all part of the same thing. So at this point we find that the elements of showmanship, the pillars of showmanship, the showman, audience, attention and show, begins to sort of blend together, and of course splitting them apart in the first place, like when we split something into character, material and structure in the anatomy of shows, it's always artificial, because showmanship is a process, it's a whole, it can't be broken fully into parts. It's merely an exercise of mapping a complex territory to gain deeper understanding. And in writing this organic and speaking about it, an organic, endlessly interconnected process, when we're writing that out one word after another, then that's actually artificial. So we're talking about one thing which is a whole by dividing it into parts. So of course as we go now, this will more and more start to merge and bleed over into each other. Before we go into this fourth and final element of showmanship, which is shows, which we'll look at in a few episodes, we'll merge into that. But we'll leave it for today. But for the next chapter, as we step up in the next episode, I'll try and make this a little bit more concrete, because I'm aware that these ideas that I talk about there, they need fleshing out, and we probably need to go over it in our minds for them to be really useful tools. But they're always good. So next episode, we are going to look at the ways that these theoretical components can manifest in real performance, and I'm going to use my tennis act as an example of this. And there we come to the end of another exciting exploration along the way of the showman. If you do enjoy what we are doing here, it would be excellent if you could write a review, click 5 stars on iTunes or anywhere where you get your podcast. It would also be excellent if you told somebody about that the podcast existed on Instagram or Snapchat or wherever you have social interactions online with your friends. That would be very excellent. But that'll be all I need to say for today. It's been a pleasure walking this little leg of the journey with you. So until next time, take care of yourself, much your love, and I hope to see you along the way.